Hi, I'm Elizabeth Cornwell, and with my co-host Larry Mendoza. Welcome to The Road to Reason. We have a very special guest today, Edwina Rogers, who is the Executive Director of Secular Coalition for America. But before we get to her, Larry, what news, what good, exciting things are happening right now in the secular world?
Well, you know, there's a lot going on. And of course, there's a lot going on with the Secular Coalition, but we'll get into that in a minute. But normally what I do is I scroll the blogosphere to find some very interesting news items. And the couple of news items that I have here I found from a Friendly Atheist blog. So I would recommend everybody go check that out. But one of the things, there was the Satanic Temple of New York, decided for some reason to go to Mississippi and to do a ceremony, which is a very interesting ceremony. Is what they do. They posthumously turn people gay. And the target of this last ceremony they did was actually the mother of Fred Phelps, who is the founder of Westboro Baptist. And so what this entails, it's interesting. What it entails is they go over the tombstone and they have the officiant, which I guess in this case was the spokesperson, Lucien Greaves, stand over a gay couple who then kisses over the tombstone. I guess they do male-male, female-female, and then they finally conclude the ceremony with the officiant, I guess you would say, that he rubs his testicles on the gravestone, I guess. And that's supposed to be the posthumous conversion of Fred Phelps' mother into, I guess a lesbian. So I thought that was kind of interesting news. You hear a lot of interesting craziness from the religious world, and that's just one of them. Another, I guess, more upbeat news item here is there's this bar over in Louisiana called, out of all things, Paradise Bar. And it's owned by a gentleman of the name Nick Simon. And what happens is some of his customers, like all bars, they end up drinking a little bit too much, so they have to go home. And they can't drive. So Nick provides sometimes a designated driver. He calls him a cab. However, in doing so, they have to leave their car parked at the parking lot. So what happens is this church, I guess across the street or somewhere in the neighborhood, took notice of this and decided to leave them pamphlets saying, you need Jesus, you're ruining your life, come to our church, we can save you, this, that, and the other. Nick decided this was a brilliant idea, and what he did is he started a campaign where if you go and turn in a pamphlet from this church, you will get a credit token for a free drink.
Oh, I like that.
And so, it's a great idea.
So all you secularists out there in Louisiana, be sure to find this bar.
Yeah, this is in Leesville, Louisiana. It's called Paradise Bar. If you have too much to drink, just leave your car in a parking lot. It'll be filled with pamphlets. You take those into the bar the next day or whenever you come in next, and you'll get tokens for free drinks. So this is great. And then to add to this, what he does is he takes the pamphlets and turns them into a recycling center. So it's a win-win for everything. It's environmental, you get free drinks. And as Hemant Mehta from Friendly Atheist mentioned in his blog, it says it's a way to turn wine, W-H-I-N-E, into wine, W-I-N-E.
Okay.
So that's the other. And I got one more piece of news before we get into Edwina here. We have tentatively scheduled, or in a process of scheduling, Westboro Baptist. I know we mentioned Westboro here in the beginning, but we are going to get them here on our show live. So you guys will have an opportunity to actually talk to them, call in, let them know or ask them questions, whatever. So we're working on the logistics of that and the dates and who's going to be on the show. But I think here in the next few weeks, stay tuned, check us out on Facebook and YouTube. We'll be putting out this information on when Westboro will be here.
Maybe we can find out how they feel about their mother being a lesbian now.
We will certainly ask them.
Okay.
That will be a point. So anyways, having said that, let's go ahead and jump into today's topic, right? We have a very special guest here, Edwina Rogers. She is the Executive Director at the Secular Coalition for America, which is a nonprofit coalition that represents the diverse and growing voice for separation of religion and government, which is a very, very big important thing. And I think almost every single secular organization out there really jumps on board with separation of church and state. That's the big thing. So Edwina here has served in public policy in positions in the government for about 20 years. You've served in the U.S. Senate. You've served for 2 presidents, I believe.
That's correct.
George Bush and George W. Bush. You worked for Senators Lott and I think Sessions, correct? And you were
Yes.
let's see, what do we have here? You were the General Counsel for National Republican Senatorial Committee, correct?
That's correct.
Wonderful. She has a BS in Corporate Finance from University of Alabama, and you got your JD from Catholic University, out of all places.
That's
Very
correct,
interesting.
yes.
So she's also a regular contributor to a lot of conservative newspaper columns. She's health and policy journals, and also regular strategist on cable news shows, in my understanding. So having said that, let's jump into the topic. Secular coalition. Lay it on us. What is it?
That is my favorite topic.
I figured so much.
Thank you for asking, guys. So I've been with the Secular Coalition now for 1 year and just a couple of months, and we do have quite a list of successes. We're very much into measuring our results. The skeptic secular community, they want you to prove what you're doing. So I would say probably our biggest accomplishments have to do with, we now have chapters in all 50 states. Just a year ago, we had chapters, affiliates more so, in Arizona and Alabama, so we're very proud of that. Just 2 weeks ago, we launched the websites for all 50 states, along with ours. We had a very successful policy conference, Lobby Day, in April. It was the first ever policy conference that I'm aware of where the decision makers and the legislatures came and spoke to us. We had Senator Harkins speaking at lunch. We had Congressman Nadler speaking at breakfast. We had a top staffer with Ways and Means who was Republican speaking to us about fundamental tax reform. We've had good success there getting our comments into the Republican recommendations that came out of Ways and Means in May, on May the 6th. We did all of our scorecards last year for all 435 members of Congress that were up for re-election, about a third of the Senate, of course, very active in the presidential elections. I covered and attended the Republican convention. We had secular leaders at the Democratic convention. And I would say, probably, I guess, what I'm most proud of has to do with how we work every week to facilitate the coordination within the movement and unifying the movement. And we mainly do this through a call every Thursday at noon for 30 minutes, and we cover all the topics.
That's wonderful, and that's so. We talked about, you're talking about unifying. Let's talk a little bit about unifying the movement to 50 states, and I believe we have a graphic on that. But so 50 states. What do these 50 states entail? These multiple groups in each state? Is this one major group per the state, or how does that
Yes.
work?
Okay. So the state chapters basically work just like, and the slide that everyone can see here is about the unifying call that we do nationally. And so on the national call, we report what's happening in the states. So with the state chapters, they operate just like the national movement. So basically what they're doing, they're looking for organizations to participate. So it's a coalition of groups. So like, for example, we know in California that there are about 215 secular groups. We know nationally there are about 1,800 secular groups. Did the call just on Saturday with the Minnesota people. We know there are about 35 to 40 secular groups in California. In Minnesota, so we're reaching out to all of them, asking them to participate. And then it's a true coalition. Of course, we're looking for individuals as supporters and to do the work.
Right.
And that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, the joke is always about, secularists, it's like herding cats, and you've been able to herd cats.
Yes.
And get them to join together, and I think this is absolutely terrific, and what we've needed for quite some time. So congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful, and that's one of the things I always, unifying groups is a very difficult thing to do. But what is more surprising to me, in a positive way, is that there's so many secular groups out there. I mean, 200, what was it, 230?
215 just in California.
Just in California. That's
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
There are other huge numbers. Pennsylvania, 77, 96 in Texas.
Wow.
In our database, as far as individuals, the second largest group is in Texas. And you wouldn't think that Texas would have such a a large group.
Or maybe you would, because there's clearly there's a lot of pushback, and like with every movement, you're always going to have pushback. But that's good news, and I think we need that. And I think I urge everybody out there who's wants to start a secular group. We have a Secular Coalition. You can start a group, affiliate. This is what we need to really get the message out there and lobby. And also because I want to mention that it's at the local and state level sometimes where a lot of the action is. I mean, of course, we need something at the federal level. We need things that in the Senate and Congress and in the White House, but also pay attention to your school boards, your local governments, your county governments, all these things. I mean, recently in Fairfax County, I don't know if you guys have heard, they pushed in a zoning commission is trying to zone out abortion clinics.
Right.
And it's just, they thought it was going to be done completely under the radar, but these are the kinds of things that, somebody that keeps tab with a secular group can kind of touch base and then, maybe get some help with the Secular Coalition for America. So that's wonderful. So good. So let's talk a little bit about some policies. So what have you guys been up to there up in DC?
Okay, so we really focus on 6 major policy areas, and we are very excited that we're going to be releasing the Secular Policy Guide, which comes out in September. So the whole movement's working on this document. They're quite common. They're geared for legislatures, for their staff, for decision makers in the executive branch. Can be used at the federal level and also at the state level. So we've got 2 co-chairs. We have everyone working on it, and we've got a constitutional framework section, health and safety, education discrimination, military discrimination, tax policy, and international. It's going to be about 50 pages long, and we're going to release it with a briefing in the Senate and a briefing in the House. It's going to be electronic, printed copies available in all 50 states. These are quite common, like for example, Brookings has a policy guide, Cato has a policy guide, just about every movement out there has a policy guide. I was meeting just last week with the Southern Baptist Convention. They have a policy guide that's based on the Bible. And so we have our policy guide that's based on reason and research, and yes, sort of well thought out.
And is this something that anyone can download off your website?
Yes, it's going to be on everyone's website. It'll be on every group's website, and it is a coalition document, and we also have it loaded with allies. So like, for example, in our section on women's reproductive right, we have like Catholics for Choice, we have Republicans for Choice. So everywhere we can possibly get an ally to join us on a subject matter, even the Southern Baptist Convention, with the blasphemy laws, international blasphemy laws, they said they would sign on to that particular topic with us. So, yeah, so as a former staffer, a document like that's very important. You might have an hour or 2 hours to get the best argument on both sides. The senator or congressman would like for you to get it from the original source, from coalitions that represent all the stakeholders, and not do the research yourself. So now ours would be accessible. They can just grab it, download it, put it right into their document, walk with the senator to the floor for the vote.
That is absolutely terrific. What a great piece of work.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Terrific.
I want to ask you a quick question. So you mentioned, you're in some of these cases, you are collaborating with the Southern Baptist Convention, Republicans. Now, you probably are well aware, the atheist and secular movement tends to be leaning more Democratic, right?
That's true.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's really interesting. And me personally, I think it's important to reach out to everybody, because at the end of the day, the common goal is the common goal, correct?
Right.
So how do you play that now with Republicans and even other Christians who share, which I would assume would be the goal of separate church and state?
Yes.
You mentioned the Southern Baptist. What is it, coalition? I'm sorry,
Yes, the Southern Baptist Conference.
Conference,
yes.
That's right. So how is it working with these other groups, these other I guess you would say, familiar groups in the atheist movement, I guess?
Well, the way it works, in my background is basically a coalition expert. So I put together a very large healthcare coalition when we were working on healthcare reform, when I worked on the White House, a lot of different coalitions that I've managed in the past. So to have a very successful coalition, you need allies. So first you have to unify our movement, which I think we're now pretty unified. And then on a specific topic, Like, for example, we're working on getting our chaplains in the military, humanist, atheist chaplains in the military. So we're looking under every rock to find support, and it could be a religious group, it could be a Christian group, could be a conservative group, could be a Republican group. So that's the key to coalition management. But also, we know that we need to be bipartisan. We have a two-party system here in the United States. It has served us well. And so we're reaching out to Republicans, they're reaching out to us. We're also working closely with the Democrats. Right after the elections last fall, we were asked to come in and brief the Republican National Committee on the secular movement. The movement in the last election did vote about 73% Democratic. There was a time in the early 80s where it was closer to 60-40, closer to 50-50, but that was, of course, before the Christian right moved heavily into the Republican Party. So we try to stay bipartisan, and we have very substantial Republicans who are funders in the secular movement, because I've gotten to know a lot of the major funders, and I was surprised to find out from the major funders they tend to be about 50-50.
Really?
Yes, a lot of business people who are libertarian, who are Republicans, care about separation of church and state, and are funding a number of the groups, and we're very happy to take those funds.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's, yeah, take it, the more coalition we have, especially when we're lobbying in Congress, we need, it gives, I think, the movement even more credibility if it's diverse and not just on one side. And
the research shows that the people who are in the secular movement who are non-theists, they vote on average over the last 10 years about 30% Republican, and that's pretty much in line with the LGBT community and also the labor union community. They're about 70-30. So since it is approximately 30% or 25%, it's a bit of a moving target. We don't want to disenfranchise those people. We want to throw out the welcome mat and see if we can get a lot more into the movement. So we're just making it friendly and inviting to all the non-theists, no matter how they vote. And another interesting thing is that the research shows that of the people who are non-theists, 50% of them are for smaller government and 50% are for larger government. So you can just see on the fiscal side that we do have inroads with the fiscal conservatives, and trying to attract them over to the secular movement would be very beneficial for us.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of them are very influential, I would imagine, as well, for these people.
No, it's incredibly important. And a lot of people forget the history of the Republican Party. I mean, it was not always radical religionists coming in. Certainly Goldwater wanted nothing to do with the religious right and thought they should not be involved with the Republican Party. And it was after the Carter administration that Republicans started really opening their doors, after the Democrats had opened their doors to the evangelical community. Yeah. So we do have, the Republican Party does have a long history of fighting for secularism. So it's almost as if the party's been a bit hijacked, and maybe they'll get a chance to take it back.
It's true, and it's a very fluid process. I grew up in rural Alabama, and when I grew up, I don't remember ever meeting a Republican, and I didn't consider myself Republican. But then I remember coming online when Reagan was coming through for his re-election, finishing college, getting out there and working. And it was almost overnight when the South went from predominantly Democratic to predominantly Republican. And at the moment in the Southeast, there is not one elected official in any of the states in the Southeast federally who are not Republican unless they're African American. So they have such a hold on the South. Yeah. It's a very regional issue, and it's an urban versus rural issue. Right. So we don't want to forget our rural friends that might be in the South who believe in separation of church
and not necessarily because of religion, but because of the small government versus big government. And I think sometimes we can be a little bit too myopic and assume that the whole reason everybody votes Republican is because they're religious, and that's just not true. So opening those doors and making it clear that Republicans or secularists, and maybe we can get both parties fighting over us. What do you think?
That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into play.
That's right.
And to get them to compete
And
for
say,
us.
who wants our vote? There's a lot of us out there.
Yes.
Well,
The problem has been the Democratic Party takes us for granted, and the Republican Party didn't even know that we exist.
Existed. Yeah, we got to make sure that the Democrats don't think of us as just being someone that's going to hand over our cash and say, we'll vote with you.
Yes.
What's interesting, speaking on this topic too, I mean, I had the pleasure of a year ago, right before the Reason Rally, it was another secular coalition lobby, and I don't know if you remember, but we lobbied together. We went in the same group.
I do remember.
And I remember we got assigned, Eric Cantor's office. I'm sitting there thinking, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. But, what I found out is lobbying and talking, you find out that actually there's a lot more we share in common than each side, I think, assumes, And so I think it's valuable to try to to at least try to join forces where we agree, because there's a lot of things we disagree, on many reasons. But the things that we do agree, we got to be out there, go, and that's why it's important to go talk to, especially the side that you think is the one that's going to be least receptive.
That's right where I go.
Those are the people. That's exactly. That's where you got to go.
Well, and I've been surprised at the reaction, because I mainly go in to try to educate Republicans, and a lot of the staff, they're younger. Do you remember when we did the meeting with Eric Cantor's?
Yep.
His chief of staff was from Alabama,
Yep.
so I knew he was from Alabama. So we immediately did the Alabama connection. So he warmed up. And then he was very curious, and he was like, what is a humanist? Please explain all of this to me. And so with the staff being quite young, a lot of them will say to us, oh, well, they'll kind of give us a code word, or they'll say, oh, well, I'm not a Christian. And then they'll give you the position of their boss. And we do know that a lot of the bosses have listed Methodist or Episcopalian or Presbyterian, but then when you get them behind closed doors and you talk to them, you find out they're actually non-theists. But in order to win a campaign or election, especially at the federal level, you need to be in as many coalitions as you can possibly be in. And if you skip the religion one, you're skipping a huge voting block. But I know this, because I ran a little community campaign, and you have to be in every club and for voter turnout. Yeah, it really helps.
You have to be, exactly. You have to be part of every club. And
but things are changing, fortunately. They're starting to slowly get better. It's because of the international trend and the demographics that you can see that the moment. There's the United States that has about an 80% God belief. There's Kuwait that has a 90% God belief. And then there's Canada next to us that has a 50% God belief. And you go down to Australia and New Zealand, you're looking at the high 30s. You go over to Europe, there's no country, the last time I checked, that had more than a 40% God belief. You can even go up to Sweden and Estonia, you get in the teens and 20%. So it is the assumption, and it appears that the United States will be trending along with Canada, Australia, the other Commonwealth countries, the other European countries, and we do see the numbers soaring, especially the under 30 numbers, where you've got a 40% now who are non-theists, who are not affiliated with religion.
Right, and it's interesting also. A couple shows ago, I think 2 shows ago, we had David Tamayo, who is the president for the Hispanic American Freethinkers.
Yes.
And talking about these demographics and how things are changing, we have a large percentage of Hispanics here that we need to target as well. And that's what I think Humphrey is going to do a great job, I believe, in doing that. But it kind of speaks to these demographics, these growing demographics that we need to start to target. And I think I think that's going to be the next big thing, is everybody's going after the Hispanic vote, especially after this last election.
Yeah.
We are too.
And we are too, as we should.
Yes, we have a whole outreach program that we're initiating in January. We've raised the money for it, a lot of money, to target women, Hispanics, African Americans, LGBT, conservatives, and young people. And people in the science community.
Wonderful. Well, let's got about a minute or so before we need to go on break. Why don't we bring up there's another slide when we're talking about secular policies, about some of the major policies that are there, the Keystone subject areas. So we'll talk about, which ones are we going to talk about today? I guess the health.
Well, I'd point out health and safety, education, discrimination. That's where most of our work is. Tax policy, mainly because The House and the Senate are working on fundamental tax reform, although that has been hijacked by the IRS hearings and the issue there, government actions and military. So those are the 6 major areas that the secular movement comes together and that we focus on. And education received sort of top billing in all of our strategic planning and surveys that we've done to the community.
Good, that's wonderful. Yeah, I can't, we'll got to hear in a few seconds. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the, a little bit more detail about the education, the health and safety, and the discrimination aspects, which I think are very important for, to discuss. So we'll go ahead and take a break and we'll see you back in a few minutes.
At NASA right now, scientists and engineers are working every day to help humans learn how to better care for our home so that we never have to leave. NASA has a fleet of satellites around the planet that keeps track of climate change and studies how humans are affecting the planet. NASA has a ton of geniuses, and all of them are working for a future that has a healthy Earth in it. Like when NASA helped find the hole in our ozone layer so we could fix it before the problem got out of control, NASA is doing its part. We have to do ours. This is our home. To learn more about how NASA is keeping an eye on Earth, visit www.nasa.gov/Earth.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue. But the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So I just moved in with this family and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Welcome back to The Road to Reason. We're here today with our special guest, Edwina Rogers, who's the Executive Director with the Secular Coalition for America. And we were just talking about some of the things that the coalition has been achieving, what you're doing, and what you hope to achieve. And
we left off, we were talking about some of the Keystone points. So I think the first one is let's tackle education. Let's talk about that.
That's right. So we have been working on our strategic plan, and we do a survey of everyone in our database to find out what do the non-theists care most about, what do they want us to lobby on and work on. And they came back, education. In particular, of course, 2 issues. They want proper science taught in the classroom. They do not want creationism taught to their children. Also has to do with sex education, medically correct sex education, not abstinence-only sex education, non-theist groups having the right to form at universities and also at high schools, something that they care about, and then not having the bullying. So education would be number one. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that we're doing this fall, we have Richard Dawkins coming over. He's going to do a briefing in the House and in the Senate on proper science. We also have Marty Klein, who's going to do a briefing in late October on medically correct sex education and the importance of teaching that and the outcomes, that you do get much better outcomes than abstinence-only education. So that is a big focus for us.
Yeah, and I believe we do have a slide on that as well, if we can pop that up and show our audience here these points. And then we, once we do that, we do have a phone call here. But yeah, so the voucher programs, that's a big one. I know there's been a lot of like a lot of states, was it Louisiana, I think, did a big voucher program?
Yes. And this photo here is also cute. That was at Reason Rally.
Oh, there was, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
So on the voucher program, we're concerned about federal and state tax dollars going to religious schools, of course.
And so we have Rick is on the line. He's calling in. Can we patch him through?
Guys.
Hey, Rick, how's it going?
Good. Sorry I can't be in there today, but I just have an observation more than a question. You know, you hear about herding atheists is like herding cats, and it's true. But what I see is we have a lobbyist, and there's a lot of other signs, and I think that's just a positive sign. A lot of what we do, I think, is based on the way the gays handled suppression and oppression in past decades, and that is that there's two areas that need to, two approaches. There are the people out in the street doing theater and carrying signs and demonstrating, but there also has to be the component behind the scenes, working with the law, working with the government, and that's how really a lot of it gets done. There's got to be both, but it's an important aspect of it, and we have a lobbyist now, and I think that's great. The cats are getting herded as we speak.
The cats are getting herded, correct.
It just took a big can of tuna.
Yeah, a big can of tuna. Well, I mean, but you're correct, and it's all the cats being herded. It's of all different political ideologies, of different races and color. I mean, it's just, but that's the way you got to do it. That's how you got to be successful in these things. And that's the whole point behind the Secular Coalition, I believe, is to kind of unite. I know there's been some apprehension, I think, and a little bit of, what's a conservative Republican doing this, But I think that's really where we want to go with this. We need somebody that can speak the language.
Yes. Well, I think that when the board, when they were looking for a new executive director, they didn't go out with the mindset that they were going to target and find a Republican, but they had a list of criteria that they were looking for, in particular someone who was a coalition expert and who had run national coalition campaigns and had set up shop in all 50 states. They wanted the person to be an attorney. They wanted the person to have worked at the White House, worked in the Senate, or worked in the House, and was very familiar with working with boards. And they had a national search firm, and they came back, with their candidates, and they were surprised to see that one was a Republican. And then I think they were wise beyond their years. They were thinking, well, actually, most of the issues are over in the Republican Party, so here we have a well-known Republican that can go and work with Republicans and sit down with them and explain to them a lot of it has to do with educating. Not that that's going to fix everything, but at least I'm in there swinging and trying, daily, and we are starting to see a little bit of movement. Having the RNC ask us to come in and say, hey, what is this movement that is now the largest religion in the Democratic Party, that is growing numbers every year? Are you guys unified? Are you a coalition? Do you know where your people are? Can you get in touch with them? Are you organized? And those are keys, to get a seat at the table, to get a voice, to get respect, to get visibility. You have to prove and show that you are organized, that you can reach out into any state and any community and bring people to the table.
Yeah, mobilize people, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to say, since you've been on board and under the leadership, with SCA under your leadership, it has just done tremendously. And to see its growth and to see how just how much you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. I'm just amazed.
It's not me. We have a fabulous team.
Well, you have a whole team,
yeah.
but it takes your leadership and bringing that team together and making it all work. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yes. But I think all the national leaders, they were ready for it, and they've been, backing me up. They're like, she's a professional. She knows how to run a coalition. Let's let her do her work. And if anybody's on our side, then I want them. I want them in our group, and I want to focus on the opposition. Of course, we do a lot of interesting opposition research too, to know what we're up against and those arguments.
Good.
Okay, well, I want to thank Rick for calling in, and I want to remind
thank you, Rick.
The viewers out there that call in. If you have a question for Edwina, we have a live call-in number, so feel free to call in. So let's talk about some of the another aspect of the Secular Coalition and work they're doing, the health and safety. So explain a little bit about that. Like, what are we doing there?
Yeah, well, on health and safety, and I do believe we also have a slide for the viewers on health and safety. And the big focus would be, of course, women's health, the contraception issue, which has been hijacked by religion, pharmacists denying emergency contraception, and medical neglect of children through faith healing. There are other categories that we care about, like, for example, the churches that have the child care centers and not having to comply with any of the health and safety standards. But the contraception mandate has been the big national fight that hasn't gotten any better. It just hasn't gone away. It's moved over to litigation now with more than 60 cases.
No, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's a very big thing. I mean, the women's issues is, there's got to be a lot of lobbying, because right now, a lot of states, they are just really hammering down on women's health issues.
Oh, it's awful.
Unbelievable.
And I think that's one place where you can get young women really involved. So many of them, I mean, they grew up having this right.
Yes.
And thinking that it could never go away. I mean, I never thought it could go away once we gained them. But
me too.
Being old enough to remember that fight, and now we're seeing it slip away. And I think of how much my niece has lost, and your daughter has lost. And we need to get young women motivated and say, this isn't a gimme. You got to fight for your rights. Rights just aren't handed to you. I mean, that would be a nice story if they could be. If the rights were there and just handed down by some great being in the sky.
You're right.
But that doesn't work. You have to actually fight for the rights. And getting young women angry and working with groups like yours, the secular groups, and making sure that people know that they men cannot just go in and sweep in and say, we're taking all these rights and you're not going to be able to.
We're working on every possible argument. I used to do healthcare policy for Fortune 500 companies, and it's very well known that the health benefit, along with the retirement benefit, is owned by the individual, is owned by the employee. They earn it. It is not owned by the employer. It is the employees. So I'm surprised to see that employers feel like that it's theirs and that they can control it. And then also, when I was working with these Fortune 500 companies, we've known for more than 2 decades that there was a short list of prescription drugs of which contraceptions was on it, and some diabetes and drugs and other drugs, that you would have fabulous health outcomes on the back end and much lower cost if they were promoted and made available at very low cost or no cost, and that's proven in science. So when the NIH, the National Institutes for Health, came out with this strong recommendation, I was not surprised. The Fortune 500 companies have known this for 2 decades and have been offering it to their employees because it was good policy and it was good for their health.
Absolutely, I agree. And let's, kind of carrying forward with this line of thought, this is kind of what I considered employment discrimination. And believe we do have a slide on discrimination, because not offering, I think, proper health care because of religious beliefs is, in my opinion, discrimination against your employees.
Yes.
So, I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on the discrimination issue. So There's religious discriminations that employers are afforded because they're claiming a religious exemption. We see discrimination against atheists and non-theists with landlords. We also, in addition to employment, we see it in adoption. Of course, we're very involved in the marriage equality debate because the other side is blaming that on religion and on scripture and Bibles. So this is something that is a huge priority for us. That's a cute slide there when we meet with people who are arguing against marriage equality.
That's right.
They'll say, "Oh, well, that we were for traditional marriage," and then I'll say, "Well, do you mean when women were chattel, or when only whites could get married and slaves could if they had permission of their slave owner, or was it when interracial couples couldn't legally get married in the U.S.? Which traditional piece of marriage?"
And of course, from an anthropological perspective, most societies agree to polygyny. So, I mean,
it used to be legal in the U.S. too.
Right.
It was legal in the U.S.
And most traditional societies allow for men to have multiple wives. So there's a tradition.
I want to keep the tradition of marrying and divorcing 5 times in this country. I mean, that's very traditional in this country.
Yes. So we need a forward update of humanity here with marriage equality for sure.
That's wonderful. And all of these issues are, I guess, on both state and federal level, I would imagine you guys are
for sure.
Certainly. So, let's move on to federal. What is specifically the feds? I know we have a slide on. Keep an eyes on the feds.
We have a slide
right?
here.
Yeah.
It's just sort of some funny issues. There's a piece of legislation, Equal Protection Rights for Fetuses, and Absence Education Reallocation Act. So big focus on federal dollars being for absence sex education only, and a prenatal non-discrimination act. Those are just some examples. Hopefully those will not get traction, but we're mainly, at the moment, we're working on the INDA, Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and chaplains, getting humanist chaplains in the military, religious privileging in the tax code, school vouchers. Those are the pieces of legislation. FEMA funding, rebuilding churches. Those are the ones that are actually live right now, moving around, bumping around in the House and the Senate.
Good. And then also, so what successes that we had? I believe we have a slide on the federal successes. So we talk about the Secular Coalition, what you guys are doing, some results directly.
Well, there has been a big move to expand the exemption for religious groups in the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. We've been able to keep that at a bare minimum. Of course, we would like to not have a religious exemption at all. We introduced an amendment for the first time on the House floor to get humanists, ethical union, atheist chaplains in the military. We've got 23% of the military are non-believers, not affiliated with religion, and 67% of the chaplains in the military are evangelistic. We have 0 that represent our community, and they hold a lot of resources and do counseling. So we're lining up some strange bedfellows there. So we're right now working on that in the Senate. We have a much better chance of getting it through the Senate. As I mentioned, we were able to get our comments in the Ways and Means recommendations that came out in May for religious privileging in the tax code. And that has to do with mainly churches filing some kind of minimum financial disclosure.
Right, something.
Sure.
Yes, something.
Yeah.
We read about the Catholic Church spent $3 billion recently defending their predatory priests. And I think, you see the mega mansions that some of these large churches, their ministers have. And
Lexus SUVs, all that good stuff.
Yes.
All right, now I know we want to kind of wrap up a little bit more on state issues, and I think Liz here wants to talk about a little bit about Edwina and who you are.
Sure.
But let's move real quick on state law. So what we have on states, I believe we have a graphic on.
Oh yeah,
that.
so things are really
That's a good one.
happening very egregious at the state level.
Yeah.
So we've got 6 states where pharmacists can refuse to dispense emergency contraceptions, 8 that do not inspect the religious child care centers at all, and we have had deaths there, 21 that exempt employers from contraceptive coverage, 50 that ban all forms of marriage except for one man and one woman, and 32 have sex education curricula that's not medically accurate, and 44 require under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, which we know, that came into the pledge to fight communism.
It looks like you got your work cut out for you on the state level.
We do.
And as I said, that's why we need more people on the state level.
And that's not even without mentioning Texas.
That's
It's a big. That's just, you just put a wall around that.
I've got 10 slides on that.
Just then on Texas.
We could do a whole show on just Texas.
Yes.
But one of my favorite topics is evolution and creationism, right? And that's what's going on. We have a slide here, a really funny slide on creationism and the monkeys. There we go.
Yes.
And so this was what, Louisiana and Tennessee, right?
Tennessee, they were able to pass the legislation where they can now teach creationism, intelligent design is what they're calling it now, in the public schools, even though there was the Supreme Court case saying that it's not legal and it has no place in the schools. And we're currently fighting it in 12 states. And we just had some good success in Montana, where our Secular Coalition for Montana were able to testify when it was still in committee, and so it died in committee. So we're tracking that in all of those 12 states.
And then, I guess, there's a lot of work cut out for us, with the Secular Coalition, the secular movement, in both federal, state levels. I know there's also some wins in the states here. I guess we're almost running out of time, and we do want to switch a little bit of gears, and I know we want to talk a little bit about Edwina and who you are. And
Well, I know when you were announced as the new executive director, there was quite a bit of flack, and which I personally found really offensive, how many people just were going to make a decision not to like you and to try to get rid of you because you happen to belong to the Republican Party. How did you handle that? How did you and your staff deal with those problems? With that?
Well, I was a little bit surprised that people would be concerned, just because I consider myself a Republican. But the staff, they were wise. I mean, we expected some people to be surprised, so I did go off to boot camp for a couple of months before it was announced to get me all ready. And then there was some sort of unfriendly comments on some blogs, but I wasn't allowed to read them. I mean, not that it would bother me. I'm pretty unflappable. Look, I've been thrown out of congressmen's offices on other issues. This girl has lobbied for India and Taiwan and Korea and Turkey, and especially when I was lobbying for India, they were still pretty much behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union, and the U.S. was very aligned with Pakistan. So I was shown the door and given the boot a few times. So
you gotta have thick skin when you're in that business.
Exactly. Yes. So I was fine with it, and I thought, well, I'll just try to prove myself, and then people will see that I really do care about secular issues and separation of church and state, and I think it's the right thing for me to stay a Republican and be a Republican. I mean, a lot of people think that I've just converted and now I'm in the Democratic Party, and then we have nobody over working the Republican Party. But the whole point, was for me to go and work with Republicans who are familiar with me. I go to as you know, Liz, I go to the Center-Right Coalition meeting every Wednesday morning and sit right there with, NRA and Americans for Tax Reform and all those groups and say, speak up. And make sure that we have our staff over at the Left Coalition meeting every Tuesday evening. So I'm doing what I can.
So now, in terms of, you grew up in Alabama.
That's right.
And so you're a little good Southern girl. And I mean, people always assume Republicans, Republicans just were wealthy.
Wealthy, yes.
But that's not your story at all.
No.
I mean, you are a self-made woman, and I think a lot of young women should look at you and applaud and say, wow, that's an incredible story of how you really did go after the world. And
well, I remember growing up in Alabama, and I was unchurched, and the people who went to church were, I thought they were rich people, because you needed a car and you needed Sunday clothes.
It's a big social scene, right?
And they expected you to contribute, and so that was sort of for rich people. I was pretty far out in the country, a dirt road, I remember 1976 when I was 12. I didn't have any phone service, and I think about 30% of America didn't have phone service at that time, especially in the rural areas. I'm 49 now, and of course I've got all kinds of phones.
But too many of them. Yeah, it's like a leash.
This was a different time, but I got a scholarship to the University of Alabama. I also worked full time. I borrowed the money to go to law school. There was a really funny story that the Wall Street Journal had a little article about me one time talking about how I had 5 jobs and that I must be driving a taxi between 5 in the morning and 8 in the morning because those were the only hours that they couldn't find me working. So I do work, have a strong work ethic, and I was attracted to the Republican Party because it was the time when Reagan was coming through and talking about pull yourself up, by the bootstraps, be an entrepreneur. I'm very entrepreneurial, so I'm love to go into a coalition that either is brand new. The last coalition that I started, my first year budget, I was able to raise $120,000. Next year, about more than $500,000. The next year, $1.2 million, $1.8 million. And so I'm not afraid of starting with nothing. I'm used to starting with nothing.
Yeah, you've done it.
And not that when I started with the Secular Coalition it was nothing. It was already 10 years old, already had a fabulous staff. But I'm very interested in taking it to a whole new level. And so if I had been approached and they said, we just want status quo, just keep it the way it is, then I wouldn't be the right person for status quo. I need to leave with it times 10.
There's always room for improvement, and certainly, the secular movement definitely needs that. It's gotten a big boost in the mid 2000s, with the whole, the rising of all the new atheists, and which gave a big boost. And I mean, we just got to keep going on that momentum. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, criticism right now also, where it's kind of stagnating the movement a little bit. But we need people like you to kind of bring it back in, and people like also Liz Cornwell and everybody. I mean, it's everybody working together, I think, and so yeah, got to always think outside the box. And you seem to have certainly the experience and the knowledge and the know-how to bring that change and bring it to that next level.
And I think it helps that I was fresh to the movement, and that in other coalitions, the last one I ran, the healthcare one, if you were coming from the hospitals, then it's controlled by the hospitals. If you're coming from the physicians, then it's controlled by the physicians. But if you're coming in kind of as a fresh, neutral party, then I think that you have a better chance of unifying people because they're not suspect that, the atheists have taken over, the humanists have taken over, or now it's controlled by the free thought people. So for the person to be neutral, who's just working to just unify. By no means are we in charge of the movement. We're only behind the scenes, let's get along, let's all work together, let's kind of divide up this portfolio and see how much we can get done. I very much want every group to lobby. I want every group to have a C4. I want every group to have a PAC. I want every group to have a lobby day. Ethical Union just had a lobby day. We did all the work to put together behind the scenes for their lobby day.
So anyone who's interested in that should contact SCA and find out how they can get their group to do a lobby day. And lobbying isn't necessarily having to go on the Hill. You can lobby your state senator or your local communities
virtually through the newspapers.
Writing letters to all those things. And I know your website has such a huge wealth of information, and those Thursday calls are great.
Yes. Yeah. And then we have training coming up on
that's
Thursday.
Right.
That's the thing. Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yes.
It's an evening training, and it's this week.
Yes, it's Thursday, 5 to 7, training on how to lobby, on fundraising, how to build a coalition, how to manage your website, also how to do communications, how to talk to the press, letters to the editor. And for our state coalitions, we'll do first drafts for them. We give all the back office support for all the state coalitions that they want. And not anymore. Some are very independent. And they're like, we don't need you on our calls. That's fine.
We got it. Don't worry. We've been doing this too. But there are groups who have our experience and they can do it, and they are independent. But again, there are a lot of groups that want to help, but they don't know how, and they need somebody to help them. I think this is integral right here. That's what we've needed. Secular Coalition training, because there's a lot of confusion. I mean, we talk about different types of lobbying, but lobbying, a lot of people think lobbying is this like, oh, you know, I got to go talk to, well, you don't really have to talk to me. Just writing a letter, I think, is lobbying. Writing a letter, you know, writing an op-ed piece, yeah, all this is lobbying. It's not activism. It's not just have to go and talking to senators and congressmen, and because it can be a little bit daunting. I mean, I remember the first time when I did it, I was like, oh, Eric Cantor's office, oh, what are we getting told? You know, this is going to be weird. But it's actually, that's even not that bad once you start doing that.
Yes.
But so this is great. Yeah, so this is July 25th. You have a webinar, 7 to 9 Eastern time, I believe.
That's right,
in,
yes.
2 hours, and I urge everybody out there to log in.
Yeah, certainly. And will you have this webinar available afterwards? So
okay, so on our website and on all 50 states, we already have a video lobbying training session that I did for California, where they had 45 people and it's broken down in segments. And we also already have all the written materials on every state website. And the webinar will be put on every state website and ours. And then we can make it and tailor it for any other group that would like the materials to put on their website. Like we can take our name off and put American Atheists on, and it can be their materials and put it on their website. So we're very much wanting this to be available for the whole movement. We're not particularly interested in our opposition taking the materials, but
wow.
Always got to run that risk when you do
yes,
things
that's
like
true.
this.
No, we're out there, and we know a number of them call into our call every Thursday.
They try to,
And we call into their calls too. So
Okay, well,
It
you know,
goes both
I
ways,
want them to be worried about us. I mean,
Yeah.
at least having them take notice of us, I
It's a
think
good
is
thing.
a really good sign.
Exactly, yeah.
And for once, they're scratching their heads, going, oh my gosh, these people aren't going away.
They're
here.
organizing.
They're
Oh,
organizing the
no.
worst thing we could possibly.
Well,
those cats are hurting.
I remember in Kentucky when we set up our chapter a year ago in Kentucky, there's a minister that kind of roams the halls there in the Capitol, and he said, I'm going to call in, I'm going to be disruptive on all their calls. And then the press got after him, and he said, well, no, I kind of didn't mean that. I'm just going to set up our own group, our opposition group. And then in Virginia, we had a state senator who said that he's going to bring us to our knees in prayer. And then, those calls were gangbusters. You know, there were just all these people calling in who wanted to support us because they found that unacceptable.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're almost out of time. We have less than a minute left. I do want to talk about, just real quick, you know, guys, we do have a Facebook. We're going to be doing some fundraising. Check us out on Facebook, on YouTube. It's Road to Reason on both YouTube channels, and also we'll have a website up soon. So keep tuned. We're going to get bigger and better. I want to thank Edwina for being here. She's been a wonderful guest, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll see you guys in a little while. So
Come back next week.
come back next week. We got plenty of good shows coming up. A lot of good guests.